Thanks for joining me for this webinar on satisfying accreditation requirements through assessment item categorization in ExamSoft. Let's jump right into the objectives. Really, the main points that I'm going to be making today are all about category mapping, the structure to set up in your system with categories that will help you satisfy accreditation requirements, and then I'll show how I've used it at our institution, and then how you can create this kind of process at your institution. I'll talk about the major players involved, each department or individual's roles, and then just some lessons that we learned and things that we'll be doing going forward. So for those of you that are newer to ExamSoft, I'm going to go through what categories are. For those of you that aren't so new, you may want to fast forward about 90 seconds or so. But each item in ExamSoft can be tagged in categories. So you create these, you have categories, and it's a separate folder structure that will allow you to identify similar types of questions, and that can be by difficulty level or instructional method, and you can see the list on the screen here goes on and on. It's important to know that all items can be placed into an unlimited number of categories. So it's not just one question per category, or one category per question, but we have several items that have more categories that they're tagged to than we can count. And also know that stats can be based on they're based on each category to learn information. So if you want to review anything about your curriculum, like I mentioned in that top note there, instructional method or style of question or learning objectives, that we can evaluate all of those to see if students are meeting the learning objectives that we want them to meet, or if certain instructional methods are more beneficial to others. In this case, we're going to be looking at mapping them to learning objectives as a way to map our curriculum for accreditation. So categorizing questions is pretty easy. After you can do it while the question is being put in, whether you're entering it manually or importing it, or you can do it after the question's already in, so you can go retroactively. So we've gone back several times and retroactively categorized whole semesters if we wanted to go back and do some data that we hadn't previously taken. Always know that your categories have to be pre-made. It's the easiest way, at least. It'll allow your question creators to simply click on the categories and add them, and you can use it for a folder structure too. So we do that a lot as a way to, again, in this specific case, map our curriculum. So for the sake of mapping your curriculum with categories as a way to help with accreditation, there's obviously different rules that are involved. And so in our institution, we have faculty and staff that both play key parts in this. So we're fortunate enough to have an instructional design team, and so the categorization is done by our staff. It's really best to have fewer cooks in the kitchen. The more people you have in there, the more likely it is that things will get confused, because you want folks speaking kind of the same language in there, and the more folks that you have in there, that always isn't the case. So, but our faculty and academic support staff will contribute to this as well, and the instructional design staff's part in this process. I would always recommend to create a process first, and then limit the number of individuals that work in the process. And role definition is very important. So in this case, we identified, hey, the instructional design staff, you're going to be the primary ones that are actually categorizing questions. So instead of sending out items to faculty members and asking them to log directly into ExamSoft and categorizing themselves, just to increase consistency and really help it be more organized, we really have it flow through this one central office, and that's made a big help. Previously, we've had more individuals in there, and it's not that they're doing a bad job. It's just that we're not speaking the same language of sorts, and so you'll also end up with some redundancy, and it's also an easy way to have things fall through the cracks if you don't have one centralized area looking at it. Obviously, content experts are needed for this process. If you're in our case, we're a med school, we don't have content experts in the instructional design area, so we depend on faculty, obviously, to give us the information needed to be able to map those questions. And so, as I mentioned this before, that middle note there, that we can have items mapped to more than one learning objective. So It's, you can do multiple categories, but you can also do multiple learning objectives. One question may address 2 or 3 learning objectives with the way that it's written, especially if you have these higher order level thinking questions that really require students to put information together. So it's not always a one-to-one, and that's something that we always try and make sure we tell faculty, to make sure that we're fully mapping our curriculum, to make sure that we're getting all the information covered. And then we monitor these statistics. So we can pull stats on every single learning objective or every single category to make sure that our program is effective, that our students are doing well on these exam items that are mapping directly to our learning objectives. So we're able to prove in this accreditation process that not only are we saying that this is our curriculum, this is what we're, our course goals and our learning objectives, this is what we're teaching students, but we're able to say that our students are learning it, and we can prove that by the fact that they've had success on these exam items that are directly mapped to our learning objectives. So just the methodology at our institution, we're a systems-based curriculum, so we map a few different ways. The one way is discipline-based, so Pharm, Phys, Histo, Path, etc. We just look at content disciplines, because in a systems-based curriculum we have several different of these disciplines per course. We also map by if we have clinical-based lectures, or if we have group activities and exam questions are written off of those, we categorize by those as well, the learning objectives from those events as well, to make sure that we're covering all of our bases. As I mentioned in the previous slide, it just shows that we address all the content, but specifically by quantity in our curriculum appropriately. So if you have X amount of hours on a topic, your question should match the amount of contact hours for that. So if you have a course that has just let's say a couple Pharm contact hours, you probably shouldn't have 80% of your tests be Pharm questions. I mean, it's basic things like that that helps us map and look at quantity even. That's not even something that we have to rely on the stats to do. That's where using categories as a folder structure is a really big help. And for the most part, faculty isn't needed for this step, because we know what lecture is going to be on Pharm or what's going to be on physiology or histology. So as an instructional design staff member, I can just look at the course schedule and know which questions are those broad topics. Once they get into actual learning objectives and things of that nature, that's something that we would need the content experts for. So there's just a quick look at our folder structure. You can see the different content areas that we have in which we map items. So that's a really broad way of looking at it, because we want to look at the really big themes in our curriculum. But on a small scale, we map them to learning objectives. So every item we try to map to the one or several learning objectives that it addresses in the curriculum. So it shows that we're assessing our learning objectives. Obviously in education, you want to have your learning objectives. You want to teach in a way that is addressing your learning objectives, and then we want to show that we're assessing those learning objectives. This can be quizzes or exams, really any type of assessment that occurs in ExamSoft we can map to these items. And it shows student outcomes by those learning objectives. And again, if we can show that the students are meeting the learning objectives appropriately, then that proves that they're meeting our course goals, and then taking that to the next level throughout the whole mapping of the curriculum. From course goals, we can map it up to the competencies of our accrediting body, and we can map it to our program goals as an institution, and all the way up to the mission. So from top down, we can go from our school mission and our accreditors all the way through to our assessments, and those assessments, step by step, will help prove that we are meeting every single part of the accreditation process. And as mentioned before, we need faculty for this, because this is definitely a content area issue. So I just made these quick, as you can see under my practice categories tab. But when we go through and map by learning objective, it's important to have a really good structure. So this is the one we use, and it's been really helpful. We'll do the first area is the the semester and the year. So fall 2017, spring 2015, whatever. And then the course name, the class session name or lecture name or whatever you want to call it, and then the learning objective beyond that. So we will map directly to the learning objective in this case, and it, step by step will map the whole course by the time that we're done. And then this whole course will map for the semester, and then the semester will map for the year, and then so forth and so on. So doing this last step is really key, and using that assessment data to prove that yes, you are, students are appropriately being assessed at your institution. So on the large scale, it completes the back end of that curricular mapping for accreditation. As I mentioned, we go all the way from mission, competencies, program goals, course goals, learning objectives, and then it's great to say that this is how you're teaching students, but the key thing that this does with mapping the assessment item to the learning objective, it shows that your students are performing the tasks and they're learning the information that you're saying they're learning, and you're proving it with these exam stats. So it's kind of the proof that kind of closes a loop on that whole curricular mapping process. So that's been really key in our institution. It's kind of being the bow that you put on top of all this. So moving forward, what are we doing based on what we learned? Our categorizing of assessment items it's growing. Every semester we build it out, just like I showed on this slide here. We're continuously building these out and continuing to do more categorization. Once we're completed, we'll have this great overall view of the learning objectives we're meeting. As I mentioned before, this helps then to address the rest of the curriculum, course goals, program goals, mission, all these things. And this is continued because we got positive feedback on it throughout the whole accreditation process. So we're being able to show these stats has been a huge help for us. A couple tips and tricks with this: begin this process as early as possible. Remember, if you're already 3-4 years in as a user, that's okay, because this can all be done retroactively. There's going to be some labor hours that are put into it. However, it's once completed, it sets you up with a really great program that sets you up for future success. It makes it really easy moving forward. Always establish the process before you start categorizing. So by that I mean identify roles. Who's going to be the person doing the categorizing? What's going to be your methodology? We do something really simple here. We make Excel spreadsheets with our learning objectives and course goals, and we have faculty just fill out a quick spreadsheet with a numbering system we create. They send it back to us, and then we manually put it in. And always have that folder structure in advance. Go through at the beginning of every semester. We go through and we put these in into ExamSoft, so we're ready to go. So once the exam items start rolling in, we're ready to map them right away. Do note that this can be altered at any time. Folders can be deleted, moved, renamed, whatever. This is a flexible process. So as your curriculum evolves, this will evolve with it. And most certainly be proactive. If you're in my kind of role in instructional design or support, always have faculty identify the learning objectives when they're writing the assessment items. It's a lot easier than for them to do it in the moment as they're writing the question than asking them 6 months after the fact. Faculty obviously have busy schedules. They're probably moving on for the next course, so we want to kind of get that right away, and that ensures that it's done in a very timely fashion. Again, you can do it retroactively, but it most certainly is just a more time-consuming task, and it takes a lot more time to contact faculty, bring them in, and get them in the loop on this. Okay, and finally, some unintended positive outcomes. It created an opportunity for us to streamline our learning objectives. So it really helped us in doing this to work with, what are our most important objectives that we want students to learn, and we identify those by the ones that these are the ones that we've been assessing. So we were able to streamline that process and really focus our content into what the students really need for future success. And in this case, it's improving our student outcomes and prepping them for the boards and then also for their clinical rotations. So we're able to focus on that. And most importantly, for someone from my point of view in working with faculty development, it was a built-in faculty development. So it's a constant reminder to faculty members that you write your objectives in a way that you're highlighting the content that you're going to assess and the most important content of your lessons. And then you make sure that you teach in a way that you meet your learning objectives and at the level at which you wrote your learning objectives. And then finally, you assess what you taught. And so this has been a great just reminder for our faculty, and I think it's been a great help for them in writing their questions, knowing that, keeping their objectives in mind, because they're going to have to map them to their objectives as they write them. So it's been really positive for us in that regard as well. So that is this condensed webinar. I appreciate your time in viewing this video. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email or on Twitter. Thanks. Have a great day.